And I am live. Welcome to Act One, a Canadian take on news events. I'm your host, Gordy Canuck, and tonight the topic of conversation is going to be the looming trade war, the trade war that just started Friday between Canada and the United States. First things first, if you're tuning in here and expecting to hear a Canadian, I am a Canadian, and if you're expecting to hear me whine, bitch, moan, and complain about the big bad orange man in the White House and to talk about Mark Carney like he's the second coming of John Paul Galbraith or Warren Buffett or some economic genius, well, forget it. You're not going to hear that here. Go watch the CBC News if you want that kind of commentary, or any of the rest of Canada's government subsidized media. They're all over that. I'm not. I encourage, if there are Americans who stumble onto my station tonight, and if you want to chime in, please do. I do not hate my American friends. And I would ask simply that when you're in the chat, if you are coming in from the United States or Canada, anywhere, if you could let me know where you're watching the stream from. If you're in the US, let me know what state, be as general or specific as you like. And same for my Canadian friends. Anyway, where are we right now? We have a looming trade war between our two countries, between the United States and Canada. And it was all triggered over the imposition of 50% tariffs that were going to be levied on about $20 billion, roughly, of trade between our two countries. Canadian exporters were going to be hit uh, with tariffs of 50% on about 20%, on about $20 billion worth of product goods that cross the border. And just to give that some scope, our two nations, we have roughly in and around $1 trillion worth of trade that takes place between Canada and the United States. And so uh, tariffs on roughly 20 billion worth of products and materials going across the border. Basically, what we're talking about is about 5% of trade in total was going to be impacted. 95% of the trade existing between Canada and the US was unaffected by this 50% tariff imposition that Trump was threatening. And now Mark Carney unilaterally, from all reports, walked away from the table. He's framing it as the Americans were asking too much. They were offering too little and asking too much. And so rather than extend the deadline, rather than continue the discussions, they were halted. Canadian negotiators were called back from Washington. Our prime minister only had just gotten back into the country on Monday. There was a Wednesday deadline for the imposition of these tariffs. I got an extension. It was extended until Friday. And initially, when that extension was granted on the Wednesday, I thought it's a done deal. This is going to happen. Cooler heads will prevail. We're talking about 5%, the imposition of tariffs on trade that represents only 5% of the total trade. And I figured this was going to be like so many other situations where it's doom and gloom, and then cooler heads prevail and everything settles and everything's done. And my assumption at that point was that Mark Carney, his friendly, the media, liberal friendly media in this country, CBC, CTV Global, Tor Star, and the rest, the usual suspects, that they would be hailing Mark Carney as an economic genius. But instead, what has happened is Carney has pulled back the negotiators. No new talks are scheduled, and Canada now is threatening to retaliate dollar for dollar. And what that means, this is where things do get unsettling. This is where things do get scary, because what is going to happen is after Canada retaliates, you can be sure, bet dollars to donuts, that the US will then retaliate to the retaliation. I have the Outlaw '07, and he's writing that Carney could have made a deal, but he needs votes before he needs any deals. Uh, without Trump, people realize he's just another lying banker. Why do bankers wear suits that don't have any pockets? Because they never put their hands into their own pockets. This is going to hurt Canadians. And whereas initially the 50% tariff, if that had gone, that's going through, and that was going to impact roughly 5% of the trade between Canada and the US. Now that we are poised to retaliate, we have Carney and the Liberal government saying that they're going to impose tariffs dollar for dollar that will hit back at the United States. So that will widen the scope. And then the Americans will retaliate to our retaliation. That'll widen the scope further. Then we may retaliate yet again, and then you get this escalation going on. And it should be noted that the US economy, their economy is worth $29 trillion a year. That is the US economy per year, GDP, 29 trillion. Our economy, 2.2 trillion. The American economy is more than 13 times larger in size than the Canadian economy. We are very much the junior partner in any trading relationship. I have Lauren Quick here, and he's writing that every G7 nation has a deal but Canada. Even Daniel Smith negotiated lower tariffs on oil and gas, and that is true. That's out west. If anyone's watching this, Daniel Smith is the premier of Alberta. And we are an incredibly divided nation right now. The United States is incredibly divided. Our economy looks like it's going to be, I don't know how we recover from this, to be quite honest. The tariffs that will be coming in, that have taken place, they're not coming in. They took effect immediately at midnight, after the clock struck midnight on Friday. So as of the very early morning hours of Saturday, the tariffs were imposed. Any American importers bringing in products from Canada, whether those products originated here or not, and we're talking about the press loves to frame it as from hockey sticks to tongue depressors. It was a wide range of products and materials that total about $20 billion a year in annual trade. But again, our total trade with the United States is in the neighborhood of $1 trillion. It's about 960 billion dollars American, or about 1.3 trillion dollars Canadian. That's because the US dollar is worth a lot more than the Canadian dollar. So you have a number of people watching. And again, if you're an American tuning into this station, turning into my channel, if you've stumbled on it for the first time, if you're expecting to hear a Canadian whining all about the big bad orange man in the United States down in the White House, not going to happen. He's not my president. He's the American president. The United States is a foreign country. We are not the 51st state, and we do not wish to be the 51st state. I have the Outlaw now writing that 33 trillion in GDP, gross domestic product, versus 3 trillion in Canada, and half of it from Chinese money laundering in real estate and fentanyl drugs, etc. I'm going to leave that alone. I the impression that I have as a Canadian is that Donald Trump wants to revive U.S. industry, U.S. manufacturing. The U.S. used to be a major world supplier, producer of steel. The steel industry in Pennsylvania was massive. I know that Buffalo, which neighbors Niagara Falls, very close to Canada, they had Bethlehem Steel for years, and it was a major employer. Buffalo was a growing city for a long time, but then when world trade liberalized and the U.S. started bringing in steel from Canada, from China, from abroad, the U.S. steel industry almost completely disappeared. Hasn't completely disappeared, but it took a hammering. And these are jobs that paid, these were union jobs, paid very well, and they were gone. And if you're old like me, I'm 60 now. You might remember the song by Billy Joel, Allentown. Well, they've taken all the coke from the ground and the union people blown away. And I'm living here in Allentown. And that's what happened in a lot of steel mill towns in the United States. They became ghost towns. I've got Miss Hellraiser is here. Haven't seen you for a while. And she is writing that Canada is 100% in a controlled decline. And unless we stand together, there's no hope for change. That's somewhat what the title to this video implies. Is this, are we following something of a playbook? It strikes me that Carney has made a mountain out of a molehill. And and I think it's absolutely true. The elbows up crowd is all full blown on this. I was at work on Saturday, and I said to a coworker, I asked, "Did you hear what happened in the news?" And he said, "You know what? What are you talking about? What news event?" And I said, "Oh, the trade war we have with the United States." And immediately, this gentleman, he's actually a little older than I am, he said, "Oh yeah, and we all know who's to blame for that." And I went, "Oh," I said, "Oh, it's totally on Carney." And he went, "Forget it." Like it was a fait accompli. Like everyone knows it's Trump's fault. Everything that all the problems that Canada has under since Mark Carney became prime minister are always, it's all on Donald Trump. It's got nothing to do with Canada's prime minister Mark Carney. And I said to him very pointedly, I said, "Okay, I take it you watch CBC News." And he didn't like that. And we get along. This is a gentleman with whom we banter a lot. We talk. We get along very friendly. We're both old, so we like talking about old music and old TV shows, old movies. And so we move the topic away because we work together. I have the outlaw writing that it looks like the UK going down Canada next. It looks to me now, I one thing I don't talk about often on this channel, and on purpose, and it's because the algorithms don't like it, and it can affect my channel's reach, is talking about Davos and a certain organization in Davos, Switzerland. Many will remember Mark Carney gave a speech there about the need for middle powers like Canada to rise up and to assert ourselves. And the CBC, CTV Global, all the liberal left-wing media was praising Mark Carney to the heavens. What a great leader. Mark Carney is so amazing. They love our prime minister, Canada's prime minister, in Davos, Switzerland, headquartered. It's a little Swiss skiing village, headquartered. It has the campus for a certain organization. Acronym is Echo Whiskey Echo Foxtrot, and they love him. And this is the same organization that came out with a branding statement around 2019, 2020, about 5, 6 years ago. They came out with a branding statement, a slogan, and it was, "You will own nothing and you'll be happy. The government will take care of everything. The government will look after you, so long as you play by the government's rules." And in countries like Britain and Canada, we're finding out that what that means with further restrictions on free speech. We have Bill C-18 that prevents Canadians from even being able to share news articles on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. We have Bill C9, which took away from Canadians the good faith protection against hate speech laws. If I quote from the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 27, uh, which refers to sexual relations between women with women, men with men, calls that wrong, sinful, calls it unnatural. Previously, I could say I'm expressing an opinion held in good faith based on scripture, and I would be exempt from someone saying that's hate speech. Well, not anymore. That provision within the Criminal Code of Canada, which protected pronouncements expressing views held in good faith based on religious principles, like what you read in the Bible, that defense is gone in this country. Talking about banning children under the age of 16 in this country from accessing social media sites. The only thing they want us watching is the CBC News, and there's talk of even further imposition on social media channels. And it's happening incrementally, slowly but surely. It's reminding me a lot of the era from 2020, when we just kept seeing incrementally things were getting worse and worse. It got to the point where people were being yelled at if they went the wrong direction down a grocery store aisle and didn't follow the stickers. Anyway, let's catch up. And I'm seeing quite a few new people on here. Glad to see you here. If you can do me a favor and just tell me where you're chiming in from. I want to know if I have some American friends who are here, surprised to find out that there's a Canadian who is criticizing his own prime minister, Donald Trump, his own prime minister, Mark Carney, and who is not trashing on the orange man in the White House. I have my issues with Donald Trump, but he is not my president. It's a foreign country. A lot of Canadians seem to think that Canada should have free and unfettered access into the American market. Well, it's a foreign country. They can make their own rules. So I have the outlaw writing. I already read that. Then I have Dustin Hoffman, 2456. Hi from Canada. So Dustin is a Canadian. It's about time we separate ourselves from the United States, get some balls and stick up for Canada. I'm guessing you are being paid? For, no, come on, man. Whatever. I mean, everyone's a conspiracy theorist in today's world. So if there's a Canadian expressing a view that doesn't line up with CBC News, they must be paid. It's like the Ottawa trucker convoy protests. The accusations were, oh, they're all being paid by all that money they got. That came from the United States, and they found out now came from Canadians, came from firefighters, police officers, came from, and EMT, came from just 99% of it was from just Canadians. But the left wing, they love their conspiracies. And so Dustin thinks that I must be, in the pot, I'm getting money from the Trump administration for my crappy little YouTube station with no production values, no professional mic, no lighting, no no green screen, no nothing. Snow laptop with a built-in mic and a built-in camera that you can get for $200-300. Man. Anyway, Dustin, thank you for the laugh. I don't mind you being here. I don't mind differing points of view. It's how we learn. But whatever. And now I have this Daddy Bear is writing that, did you know that Canada has been governed by only two political ideologies for over a century? Very true. Our entire history, it's been either the Liberal or the Conservative Party in power. All right. We keep flipping back and forth, believing they will make life easier. They all lie, brother. I will say this, there's a common sentiment out there that the left wing and the right wing, I did that backwards so it appears the right way on the screen, the left wing and the right wing, that they're both part of the same bird. And it's a commonly held point of view. However, I would point out that depending on which wing is pointing up or which wing is, the one wing can push the bird in a different direction than the other wing. And I tend to view things very much the way that the political system works in Canada is that power has consolidated very much in the Prime Minister's office. Mark Carney himself said to a visiting dignitary, I think it was an American, doesn't matter. Actually, it might have been Prince Charles, doesn't matter. Mark Carney was going around Ottawa and he was caught on a live mic. And he said, well, the MPs, they don't do much, but they're good for votes. I don't think Mark Carney has a very high opinion of his sitting members of his caucus. They're just there to vote because he has to have a majority of the votes in the House of Commons. And if you can't get them at the ballot box, if you can't get enough Canadians to vote for you to get a majority, well, then you engage in backroom dealing and you get opposition members, 4 Conservatives and 1 NDP, to cross the floor. And then you can circumvent the ballot box and do it through backroom wheeling and dealing. And that's how Mark Carney went from 169 seats and added 5 more and got himself a majority. And chances are that majority is going to hold. There are 3 by-elections coming up in this country: North Vancouver, Beaches, East York, and Toronto, and another one in Chicoutimi, Quebec. Anyway, and I have this Daddy Bear is now writing. No, I read that already. Sorry. Now Dustin came back and said, oh, there are too many comments, and if I scroll too fast, I miss them. Dustin says, I think you are a weak person who doesn't understand what is happening. Well, I understand that we now are in a trade war over a failed negotiation over tariffs that were going to impact 5% of the trade between Canada and the US. And now we have, if you know people in British Columbia, you will know that lumber mills, pulp and paper mills, are closing left, right, and center, and that people are losing their jobs over the inability of the Carney government to negotiate a deal with the big bad orange man in the United States. Perhaps, and Dustin goes on to say, perhaps you feel we should just give the states whatever they want. No, I don't think we necessarily have to give the states whatever they want. We can deal with US trade sector by sector. We can say, and if we're unable to reach a deal on this little 5% slice of the US Canada trade relationship, fair enough, we have to suck it up, buttercup, and accept the 50% tariffs and adjust accordingly. I remember when we signed the initial free trade agreement with the United States, I would have been back in 1988, 1989. Just a little history lesson. The first free trade agreement was between Canada and the US only, negotiated between the Mulroney Conservatives and the outgoing, or it was during the Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush era. And we negotiated that deal. And then later it was expanded to include Mexico. And at that time, we were told, well, there will be winners and there will be losers. I was in university at the time. I had a temporary job working at a factory, earning some bucks. The company was called Monarch Marking in Pickering, Ontario, Canada. And I remember the company dropping leaflets down talking about what a great thing free trade is. We need tariff-free access to the American economy, yada, yada, yada. And I remember on the floor, Monarch Marking, we made labels. We made labels, stickers for price guns and date guns and things like, and stickers, sold or thank you for shopping, whatever, just stickers all over the place. They ran on big machines. And I remember I was opposed to free trade. I was a liberal, The liberals back in that era were opposed to free trade. John Turner was leading the Liberal Party, and he famously said that when you see the economic levers, Canada's economy has been built east and west. When we switch when the economic levers start to operate north and south, when we cede our economic sovereignty, we will soon cede eventually the political sovereignty will go along with it. And Canadians rejected that, what John Turner's prescient words were. Fair enough. Now things turn around in political science, which is what I studied at university. This is sometimes referred to as realignment theory. And realignment theory holds that, things, what the conservatives and the liberals have flipped. The conservatives now are sounding like the liberals did back in 1988, 1989. Anyway, I'm just going to try and catch up. I'm going to try and read before I go on. This Daddy Bear says they love it when we fight with each other. It keeps us all occupied from seeing the truth we've been had. It's that old line from Juvian during the Roman Empire back 2,000-ish years ago. He wrote it in around 100, 200 AD. That he's the one who came up with the line bread and circuses. Keep them fed, keep them entertained, and you can walk all over the population. And I got more to say on that later. Dustin, you can stop putting hi from Canada. It's interesting. You're a Canadian and your username is a famous American actor. What a shock. Anyway, hi from Canada. You mean stories have not mean checked. I think you might be using voice to text. I don't know if that's what you intended to write or have put down. It's been a purple rain. I've got Meow Mix and more saying hello. Hello again. Let me know where you're from in one comment. Anyway. And then I have Dustin asking about me bringing up religion. What does that have to do with what is going on now? It's part of the larger context of what is happening in Canada. We're seeing our freedoms eroded. We're seeing our economy declining. We're in a recession. We've had 2 quarters of negative growth. That is a recession. I know they like to frame it. They say, well, Mark Carney says, well, it's only a technical recession. Duh. A recession is a technical economic term, and technical terms require technical information or definitions. I mean, if you're playing hockey and someone skates over the blue line before the puck has entered the offensive zone, that's called offside. Do you see anyone going, well, it's only a technical offside? It's offside. It's a recession. Call it what it is. And it's probably going to get worse now. I anticipate if everything goes the way it appears, Canada's going to be imposing retaliatory tariffs, dollar for dollar, on the United States. And so what's going to happen is the US will retaliate to our retaliation. And instead of only 5% of trade between our two countries being impacted, expand to 10, to 20, to 40, to over half of the trade between Canada and the US. I don't know how, I don't know when things, and I almost have to wonder, Canada, we're broke. I mean, the last time we had a balanced budget in this country was in 2015 during the Harper Conservative government's last year in office. They ran a small surplus, 1.9, $2 billion surplus, which a lot of critics of Harper, a lot of people who hated Harper said, well, that was only because of one-time accounting and all manner of explanations for why. The way I tend to frame it is it was a balanced budget. A little over, a little under, as long as we're somewhere in and around spending as much, the government spending as much outward as it has coming inward, then we got a balanced budget. 1 or 2 billion, no big deal. But now we're looking at like 60, 70, maybe more billion per year. The Carney Liberal government has projected the annual deficit to be somewhere between 60 and 65 billion when they release their budget. The parliamentary budget officer chimed in and said it's looking like it's going to be over 70 billion. And now we have a trade war, and that's going to be impacting the Canadian economy. You got Mark Carney. Don't worry, we're strong. The Canadian economy is strong, and the government is there. Our broke government is going to keep, Canadians, if you're an American watching this, Canadians, a lot of Canadians can't afford groceries. And we have something of an affordability crisis in this country. And so Carney has says that he is lowering costs, says it all the time. We're lowering costs for Canadians. How are you doing that? So I'm going to borrow some more money and then give Canadians money to help them fill their grocery basket. Well, how does that lower cost? You're borrowing money. That's inflationary, increasing the Canadian deficit, increasing the amount of money that Canadians have to pay to service the deficit. In Canada, our federal government pays more on making interest payments on debt than it does on transfers for health care to the provinces. How do you like them apples, Canada? We pay more just meeting the minimum monthly payment on the collective credit card than we pay for health care at the federal level. Insanity, but that's where we are. And this daddy bear is from Ontario, like myself. If you're curious, I'm in Northumberland County, southeastern Ontario, although I've lived all over. The beret off my right shoulder there. I used to be in the Canadian Armed Forces, served in the signal branch. I left the forces in 2021, was not willing to roll up my sleeve. I'm not a big fan of taking a medication for every little problem. I know that a lot of people do. A lot of people can't sleep, take a pill. Can't anxious, take a pill. Depressed, take a pill. Everything's a pill. Give me a pill. Give me medication. Give me pharmacia. And that's not the way I'm built. And not to say that I had all the shots somewhere lying around here. I had my travel immunization record from when I was in the forces, and I had them all. I had MMR, DTaP, hepatitis, polio, got them all. But those shots have been around for decades. Got many of them when I was a kid. And then, when I saw that they came out with a product in a few short months, I was like, I want to wait and see. I'm not a scientist, but that doesn't mean that I trust scientists. I mean, scientists came out with thalidomide. Scientists came out with Bextra. Scientists came out with Oxycontin. Sometimes science makes mistakes. And I don't think you can rush things, especially science, at warp speed. I prefer slow, meticulous. That's the way I think science should operate, in a slow and meticulous way, not at reckless warp speed. But that's me. At any rate, let's go on. We have Lauren saying to Dustin, no one cares. Please leave and let us be. We want to see Canada and US workers not suffer from these big two babies tariff war. I find Trump and Carney actually to be very, very similar, not in style, but in substance. Trump is very brash, very boastful, very arrogant, very unmeasured in his talk. He just no filter, whatever he's thinking comes out. Carney, I find, is far more careful, measured in his, but a lot of what Carney says, he lies just as much as Donald Trump. Carney, when he was CEO of, when he was chair at Brookfield Asset Management, they had a meeting and then a letter that was sent to shareholders. Carney chaired the meeting, he signed the letter, and in the letter and in the meeting, they dealt with a recommendation to move the head office of Brookfield Asset Management out of Toronto and to move it down to New York City. And that happened. And then during the election campaign, our election in April 2025, Carney was asked by reporters, what about Brookfield moving its office, Brookfield Asset Management? You were chair. They moved the head office from Toronto and they opened up shop in New York City. And Carney said, oh, that was done after I left. And our liberal friendly media did not press Mark Carney on it. They let it go. Oh, okay, that happened after you left. Fair enough. Well, the fact of the matter is that Mark Carney chaired the meeting and signed the letter urging Brookfield shareholders to approve that move, to approve moving the head office from Canada and to establish Brookfield Asset Management, a Canadian company, to have the head office in New York City. And that was done at the urging, at the behest of Mark Carney and the board of directors. So, but rather than press him on it, they just let it go. Mark Carney, like Donald Trump, likes to avoid taxation. Who doesn't? And when he was chair at Brookfield Asset Management, they registered investment funds, not in Canada, but they used the address of a bicycle shop in Bermuda. You can fact check this, it's verifiably true. And that allowed that fund to avoid Canadian taxation. Same kind of thing Trump does. Play the tax system. And people will complain about it. You'll hear Canadians follow American politics more than some Americans follow American politics. And a lot of Canadians, I know I'm out of step. I know that Dustin Hoffman here, the great Canadian who uses the name of an American Hollywood star, Dustin Hoffman here, it represents the majority of Canadians. Dustin Hoffman, I don't want to put words into Dustin's mouth, but it strikes me that he thinks that we should have free and unfettered access to a foreign country's economy, the largest economy in the world, an economy 13 times greater than our own. And I'm here to realistically say, hey, it's a foreign country. If Donald Trump wants to try to revitalize American industry and American manufacturing, if he wants to revive the U.S. steel industry, hey, you're a foreign country. Go ahead, do what you want. I don't care what they're doing in France or Britain or China or India. And I don't care what they're doing in the United States. I don't get a vote there. Let's read what's being said. John 005 is from Ontario. I've got Meow Mix and More is writing from the US. For what it's worth, and I just throw this out there, I do believe in I don't want to misrepresent myself in any way, shape, or form. And some may be curious. Dustin will probably use this and go, oh, I knew you were an American. I'm not an American, Canadian born. Port Colborne, Ontario, July of 1966. However, in very early 1967 or late 66, I was about 6 months of age, in and around there. I don't remember because I was too young. My family moved to New York City. My father worked for a large Canadian bank, one of the big five. I won't say the name. He worked for one of the big five Canadian banks. They had international operations based out of New York City, the Wall Street district. So we moved to New York City. And I lived there for about 3 years. And then later we moved to New Jersey. We moved across the Hudson River. And in New Jersey, I went to kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, and part of grade 4. Then we moved back to Canada, 1975. I finished grade 4, did all of grade 5. And then I spent a year living out in Portland, Oregon for grade 6, because the bank my father worked for, they were opening up branch offices, retail branches in all manner of US states. And for a time, my dad was managing what was the fourth or fifth branch in Portland, Oregon. So I spent a year there. And then in 1978, we moved permanently back to Canada. The summer I was turning 12, we moved to Canada back permanently. And there you go. So I hope that satisfies any curiosity about my Canadian bona fides or bona fides, depending on how you pronounce it. Um, my parents are both Canadian born. My dad was grew up in Sudbury. My mom was from Winnipeg. They both ended up meeting in Ottawa, where both their families moved to. My three of my four grandparents are Canadian. Yeah. My one grandparent was born in Scotland. Ah, didn't he say that to me? All right, let's read more of what's being said. Lauren Quick is accusing Dustin of being a typical liberal drones. Um, that's what I heard from the guy I work with today. It just sounded a lot of people just repeat back what they hear the CBC News telling them, or CTV or Global, which are all funded by the government. The CBC loves Mark Carney. He raised their annual subsidization, their annual budget got bumped up to 1.7 billion, and other Canadian broadcasters, what sometimes gets called the legacy media in Canada, they receive between $300 and $400 million a year from the federal government because they're losing money. They're broke. No one watches them. Not enough. There are a few million Canadians who still think that the CBC, CTV Global, that these are reliable and ethical journalistic outfits. Save me. Now, with that being said, does that mean that you should rely on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, or whatever for news? No, you have to be in today's world. You have to be incredibly discerning. There are a lot of YouTubers out there. That's what I am, I guess, who only want to make this is their livelihood, and their livelihood depends on getting a lot of views. And so they'll blow things up, they'll misrepresent the facts, anything that drives the clicks, anything that drives the views. Myself, from my station, I'd like to make a decent buck on it if I could. But in point of fact, right now, as things stand, I make what amounts to coffee money, literally. I mean that quite literally. Not even a coffee a day, maybe 2 or 3 cups of coffee at Tim Hortons a week is what I make. I do this because I enjoy it. I like shaking my fist at the cloud, as it were. I'm not happy with a lot of the content that I see put out on YouTube. I'm certainly not happy with CTV, CBC, or Global. And so this allows me to inject my voice into the public discourse. And if you like what I have to say, even if you disagree and you like hearing an alternative viewpoint, and if you want to subscribe to the channel, you're most welcome. Very small, very raw, very bare bones basic. Dustin's accusations that I'm, oh man, that is funny. Anyway, um, um, Dustin is saying, we are going to destroy you economically. Canada is an economy of, I mean, I think you're framing that as Canada is going to destroy the US economically. Our economy is $2.2 trillion a year. The US economy is 13 times bigger at 29 trillion. And just to put that on in some scope, okay, because a lot of people say, well, we can trade with Europe, we can trade with China, we can replace US trade with Europe, with China. Well, the European economy is 19 trillions, $10 trillion less than the American company. And it's an ocean away. And there are 27 countries in the European Union. Carney has made overtures that Canada could join the European Union. We joined a European trading consortium and we got like a $1 or $2 million contract. We paid 13, I think somewhere around 13, 14, $15 million to join this European trade group. And out of it so far, we've gotten like 10% of our money back. It's like joining Amway. Um, so anyway, the European Union is 27 countries with a population of in and around 450 million. If Canada, if we were to join the European Union, our percentage of the entire population of Europe, with Canada included, we'd be 8.3%. So you think when we went to the European Parliament in Brussels, I believe, that our voice would be heard when we're only 8.3% of the total European population? Give me a break. Uh, I have Danny is here. Danny, by the way, if you see that little blue thing next to his name, he is a moderator on the stream, like myself. He's a veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. Um, Danny's a Montrealais, a Montrealer. Uh, he's writing that Canada is on fire, literally and figuratively. Well, with all the forest fires that we've been having, yeah, no kidding. And so is the United States. They've got a lot of forest fires. There's some down now in Reno, Nevada, forcing the evacuation of I don't know how many homes. Uh, anyway, Canada is on fire, literally and figuratively, and he, I think, meaning Mark Carney, chooses to go on vacation and burn Canadians again on the tariff war. The fact that he went to Tuscany, Canadians pay for Harrington Lake. It's about 10 acres and a beautiful old cottage in the Gatineau Hills. So on the Quebec side of the Ottawa River. We have a palatial estate for our prime minister to go on vacation. Not good enough for Mark. He also doesn't like his house. He wants them to spend, I think, 50 to $100 million fixing up 24 Sussex Drive because his 10,000 square foot Georgian Revival mansion isn't good enough with its 6.5 bathrooms. Not good enough for Mark Carney. He's got better taste than that. So he wasn't willing to go on vacation in Harrington Lake. So rather, he went to Tuscany, Italy, which it just so happens that the head of Brookfield Corporation, the parent company of Brookfield Asset Management, his name is Flatt, Flatt, I believe, is the name of the chairman of Brookfield Corp, the parent company. Yeah, that guy has a private villa in Tuscany. And I almost have to wonder, were the two of them in cahoots there? Well, you got this trade war coming up with the United States. You've got 50% tariffs threatening $20 billion worth of trade between the two countries. How are you going to play it, Mark? I have to openly speculate. I have to imagine do I think Mark Carney just went to, of all the places, why Tuscany? It seems rather coincidental that his old employer, where he has millions of dollars worth of stock options still in his portfolio. And do you think he went over and talked with this guy? You think Mark Carney is working for Canadians, or do you think he's more worried about Brookfield, which is headquartered not in Canada, but in New York City? And why are they in New York? Why is the head office in New York City and not in Canada, Canadian company? Well, Mark Carney, as chair, along with his board of directors, put it forward at a meeting in October of 2024. And then later, Mark Carney signed a letter urging shareholders to vote in favor of a number of items, including moving the head office from Canada to the United States. How do you feel about that? Let me know. Do you like that idea? Dustin is having a number of his messages deleted by Danny. I'm Danny, I'm something of a free speech absolutist. I don't like my free speech being curtailed by Bill C9. I don't like it. And so unless it's openly profane or hateful. But at any rate, Lauren is writing, conservatives need to press Carney to release the full deal that Carney turned down. Amen, amen, amen. Absolutely. Excellent point, Lauren Quick. We need to know precisely because Carney lies. I mean, the CBC will say, well, he misrepresented the truth or he didn't explain himself well. We all should remember how Mark Carney explained after the deal had been reached to open up the Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. Mark Carney was at the Calgary Stampede with his mandatory cowboy hat on, no complaints there. And he explained very well. There was no ambiguity. I love that word, ambiguity. It was very clear. Mark Carney said that after paying for maintenance and everything like that, but before that, the debt on the bridge would be paid before revenues are split. There was no confusion. We're going to pay the operating expenses. We're going to take the money and we're going to the revenue that comes in, and we're going to pay off the debt that Canadians are on the hook for, $6.5 billion. And only after that, then whatever's left over will be divided evenly between Canada and the US. He explained it perfectly. No confusion. First, the debt gets repaid, operating expenses, maintenance, what have you. And after everything's been taken care of, then we divide the money. Perfect. But then the actual deal came out, and it turned out that Carney wasn't telling the truth. It's the debt repayment doesn't happen until after the revenues have been divided. Canadians have to put the cost of debt repayment after the US has already gotten its share. That's not what he said in Calgary. And Mark Carney tried to say, well, I could have explained it better. No, you explained it perfectly. And you either didn't know the deal, you didn't know what you had agreed to, or you lied. It's one of the two. Forget this. I didn't explain myself well enough. It's either he didn't know what the details of the agreement were, or he knew what they were and misrepresented it, lied. Anyway, and so I agree with Lauren. We need to see what I'm not trusting. Mark Carney has implied that the Americans were perhaps looking for concessions on labeling, because in Canada, when you go and you buy any product, here's some water here, real Canadian natural spring water, eau de source naturelle, and bottle to bottle, d'une bouteille à l'autre. So everything is bilingual. And Americans, obviously, the US, I don't believe the United States has an official language. They don't need one. It's assumed it's English. But in Canada, we label everything English and French, even in Ontario, which is, 98% English. Everything, all our products, no matter where you are in Canada, they're written in English and French. I want to see, was that actually a sticking point in the negotiations or not? Uh, I, I do not trust Mark Carney. He lied about Brookfield. That he had nothing to. He tried to make Canadians think he had nothing to do with the decision for Brookfield to move its head office from Toronto to New York. Come on. Anyway, Danny is putting up a point, and this will cheese off Dustin, who doesn't seem to like the Bible. He's writing the words of Ephesians 6:12, and this is something of a theme on my channel if you're new, is that, at the end of the day, if you're looking for Mark Carney or Donald Trump or anyone, if you're looking for a power of this earth to come and save the day, you're going to be sadly disappointed. There's only one Savior, and his name is Jesus Christ. And Danny is sharing a quote from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And when I look at Davos, Switzerland, where they love Mark Carney and their slogan, "You will own nothing and be happy," I just have to openly speculate, wonder, is dismantling the economy of Canada, is that an intended consequence? Is this by design in order to make Canadians more dependent on the government? We already need the government to, a lot of Canadians need the government. They need basically government welfare to buy food. What more will the government? And we're hearing Carney say, "Oh, your government will be there for you." There's a diametrically opposed messaging from the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. Pierre Poilievre's message, he's the leader of Canada's Conservative Party, is saying that it's government's job to get out of the way and to stop regulating everything to death, which is making the Canadian economy pretty much uninvestable. I mean, we have Mark Carney is talking about having a sovereign wealth fund to invest in Canadian projects, Canadian infrastructure, Canadian economic development. Sounds wonderful. Where is this wealth coming from? Well, we are going to borrow. I think it was $5 or $10 billion is going to be borrowed in order to start a wealth fund. So we get a new government agency, the Canada Wealth Fund, funded with borrowed money. Why? Because private investment is staying away from Canada because there is so much red tape and regulation that it makes it untenable. And so private investment is staying away. So the government says, "Oh, it's okay, we'll step in and we'll take care of it." And Canadians get poorer. Our tax bill gets higher. Canadians are going to be hit unless something changes, and I hope it will. I think it could. Mark Carney is not blind to the fact that Canadians are not, you know, that stupid. When we start to get hit in the wallet really hard, he has to watch out. What if his own Liberal members start crossing the floor, or because they figure they can't win if that were to happen? So he's got to concern himself with maintaining his popularity. And so he gave us a temporary reprieve on gasoline taxes. But come, I think it's September 8th or 9th, the 10-cent a liter excise tax on a liter of unleaded gas in Canada is being restored. And then they add GST or HST, goods and services harmonized sales tax, gets added on top of the 10 cents. So right now in my area, gasoline is about $1.70 a liter. Looking at it going up to $1.80, $1.85 a liter. And then goodness knows, higher from there. Um, And Danny says that he's only on pause. All right. Well, I've been going on nearly an hour. I am going to wrap up now, but hold on to your hats. I mean, they say that a recession is when your neighbor's out of a job, but a depression is when you are out of a job. And there are already a lot of Canadians out of work. Whale Oil Beef, who hasn't shown up on today's stream, but has been on before, has noted he has firsthand direct knowledge of a number of pulp and paper mills that have closed in British Columbia. Things are bad. Nancy is here. She's the other moderator, also from Montreal. She's a Montrealaise. Danny is a Montrealais, a little bit of French I did serve when I was in the military. I was posted to Valcartier from 2011 to 2015, donc j'ai appris débrouiller en français, pas pire. C'est pas pire pour un hostie tête carré. Not bad for a frickin' blockhead. That's what French sometimes call Canadians, English Canadians. We are les hosties tête carré. Anyway, no, Danny will get that. Nancy will get that. Probably a few others. Anyone else have any comments? I have Dustin is back and he's writing, I do not think you understand. I want to cut all trade from the United States of America. I want to sell to the world. Yes, the USA can do what they want. I'm done with them. How done with them are you? Do you watch NHL hockey? Headquartered in New York City? I don't know what part of Canada you're in, Dustin. All I know is you're from Canada. Um, uh, and he's saying that I'm conservative dummies. I don't know what I don't want to. I don't want to. Things get typed down. We all do it. I don't want to. I'm not going to straw man you or engage in ad hominem. I like to deal with the argument at hand. So you are saying that you are done with the United States. Are you going to cut off Netflix? Are you going to stop watching American television, American movies, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Amazon? Are you going to stop ordering from Amazon, another American company? I'm curious. Uh, and Dustin is it's interesting. I think you're saying you view conservatives as dummies, and yet you're saying that you love Ralph Klein, former premier of the province of Alberta, and very much a conservative. It's a little confusing. Uh, so, these are some of the questions I have for people who say, "Oh, I'm done with the U.S. I'm not gonna, I'm not buying anything from the U.S." You're gonna stop watching American TV. You're gonna stop watching sports that are headquartered in the United States, like NHL hockey. The NHL head offices are not in Canada. We have the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, yes, but New York is where NHL hockey is headquartered. Are you going to give up watching the Blue Jays? Are you legitimate questions? Are you going to stop watching Netflix? Are you going to stop ordering from Amazon? That to me, if you say yes to all of the above, you'll have my respect. Otherwise, I have to wonder, are you just engaging in virtue signaling? Oh, look how good I am. I'm not buying Heinz ketchup. I'm buying French's ketchup. Our economies after that free trade deal have become so integrated that decoupling from the US economy is going to hurt. You may want Canada to completely shut off relations with the US, fair enough, but we'll be in worse shape. We'll have an ocean. There's an ocean between us and Europe. China is on the other side of the world, and they're a dictatorship. And if you know, accusations of slave labor, the way they treat their minority they have a Muslim minority population in China that organizations like Amnesty International, they say they are horribly treated. Ask the people of Nepal, or rather not Nepal, but rather Tibet, the Buddhist people of the Buddhist faith in Tibet, how they are treated by the communist Chinese. And that's the country you want to cozy up to. Remember, Mark Carney was in Beijing not too long ago, a few months ago, and he heralded the closer relations that Canada and China are building and says that this sets us up well for and then he said very slowly, very clearly, very deliberately, even the aforementioned CBC Global and CTV, they all covered this. It's not conspiracy. Mark Carney said this sets us up well for the new world order. Said the words very slow, very deliberate. It's almost like you're saying, pay attention to what I'm saying. And we have to remember that they love Mark Carney when he goes in front of the World Economic Conference in Davos, Switzerland, where they applaud his speech there. Oh, he's amazing. The corporate world, the billionaire, trillionaire class, love Mark Carney. Should ordinary average Canadians like me, should a guy like me join in? Am I that easy to lead around by the nose by the corporate media machines that tell me what a great guy Mark Carney is? I am something of a contrarian. When I see a concerted, overwhelming message effort to push one message, one narrative, one story, when it is concentrated and focused, laser focus on getting everyone to agree to one point of view, that's when, if you're a critical thinker, you have to take a step back and say, wait a minute. That's what led me to push back against so many things during the COVID era. There were too many contradictions. You want me to wear a mask when I'm standing up, but when I sit down, I can take it off? I go to a restaurant, I don't have to wear a mask while I'm sitting down and breathing. But if I stand up, now I have to put one on. If you're a thinking person, you would realize that is insane. If a mask is a genuinely effective tool to mitigate the spread of a viral pathogen, well, whether I'm standing or sitting should make no difference whatsoever. Following the stickers down a grocery store aisle, as so many people did, and would yell at you if you didn't, you got to go because viruses only move in one direction. What? And so many Canadians and Americans and Europeans, lots of people, stupidity is not, it's universal. So many people went along. Just go along. Mark Carney, he's amazing. Elbows up, elbows up. I look at the United States, I look at the MAGA crowd, and they're drain the swamp, USA, USA. It's the same mentality as Carney's cult of followers who all go elbows up, elbows up. Same mentality. Trump, MAGA supporters have the same mentality as Carney's cult. And I want nothing to do with either camp. Anyway, let's read um, something about potash. High from just cut the oil, the potash, the LNG. Uh, we don't have pipelines. Mark Carney is great about talking about deals that are not deals. When he got back from Tuscany, Italy, when he got back from his European vacation, when he came back from home to Canada, because Mark Carney calls Europe home. He made a recent trip to Ireland and was welcomed there by the Prime Minister. And our Prime Minister, Canada's Prime Minister, said, it's good to be back home. It's good to be back home in Europe, in Ireland. When he was a year before he entered Canadian politics, Mark Carney was in front of the World Economic Forum in Davos. He was on stage. They were having a Q&A session. They were having a little symposium on world, financial trends and things of the like. And the moderator turned to Mark Carney and said, "What is your opinion as a Canadian?" And Mark Carney said, "Actually, I'm a European. I have Irish citizenship. So as a European," and then he expressed his opinion. He doesn't even view himself as being Canadian first. And I'm going to give my full, just straight out opinion on why Mark Carney descended took a huge pay cut from being chair of Brookfield Asset Management, took a massive pay cut. I mean, he still got his stock options from Brookfield, but to enter Canadian politics. And that is because Mark Carney is owned. He married into a very wealthy family, very connected, politically connected family. Mark Carney started to be seen in the company of people like Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. And I'm convinced that he became part of an old boys club. He was co-opted into an old boys club, and they pulled strings and they got him, a job as deputy governor of the Bank of Canada, later became governor of the Bank of Canada. And then when that ended, pulled some strings, got him, made him, he was the first non-British citizen, non-British national to be named head of the Bank of England. I don't think that happened because Mark Carney is such an economic genius. I think he's got some friends in some very high places who placed him there. And now Trudeau was dying. Trudeau is a product of the World Economic Forum's Young Leaders Program. Klaus Schwab, creator and former head of the WEF, bragged that the WEF, through their Young Leaders Program, he said that we have infiltrated the governments all around the world. We have young Mr. Trudeau. We have Gavin Newsom. We have this one, that one. He named off Emmanuel Macron. So many prominent world leaders have come from the World Economic Forum's Young Leadership Program. Chrystia Freeland, our former finance minister, she came from the program. And the World Economic Forum is an old boys club, and it's basically three things. The money is from the corporate sector. You have the Pfizers, the MSNBCs, the Jeff Bezoses, the movers and shakers, Soros, the billionaire class is all over Davos, Switzerland. They provide the financing. Then you have government, then you have academia. And that money is spread around and it's used to promote an agenda. The WEF has now partnered with the United Nations on their 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It's a widely held view in the UN and in Davos, Switzerland, that the world is grossly overpopulated, that we are too many people consuming too much stuff. And so we need to own nothing and be happy. That was their own branding statement. That was their own slogan that came out 5 or 6 years ago. Things are getting heated up in the Dustin is saying that as far as he is concerned, I have American connections. I don't, but I did live down there. 1977, 1978. From June of 1977 to June of 1978. That's the last time I lived in the United States, when I was 11. So if you think if you think that constitutes having American connections, I do have a few American friends on my Facebook feed. A guy I went to public school with, who's into scuba diving and lives down in Texas. Now we both lived in New Jersey. If you think that, like, you're really, I don't want to straw man you. I don't want to ad hominem you there, Dustin. But if you think that Act One, a Canadian take on news events, this crappy little channel, that I'm part of some agenda, man, oh man. I seriously have to question if your IQ is any better than double digits. Seriously. Anyway, so I'm going to leave Dustin alone. I got Dan Harold here. And he's writing that Canadian banks enjoy deep, unrestricted access to retail banking consumers across Main Street America, while U.S. consumer retail banking has virtually no equivalent footprint on Canadian soil. That is very true. That is because of our Banking Act. And I read up on it a while ago, but it's been a year or more. But if you look in the U.S., you have, TD is all over the place. The my father's bank that he worked at. When we got transferred, when he was transferred, that was the year 1977 and 1978. The bank my father worked for had opened a new branch in downtown Portland, Oregon, Halsey Avenue, and my dad was made manager of that bank and was not happy about it. My dad had not had anything to do with retail banking for 15, 20 years. And uh, I mean, it's a long story, but my dad had been used to working. He ran the bond desk in New York. You know, he was used to international banking, and now they'd sent him off to Portland, Oregon, to manage a branch. He was not happy, and as a matter of fact, that's why a year. And he did not like living in the United States of America. Uh, his all our family was it was in Canada. My dad's mom and dad, they were still alive in Canada. My mom's family, they were all in Canada. He had no, and he was tired of living in the United States. And as a matter of fact, when we left Portland, Oregon, my dad had a job offer in New York City, but he decided not to take it. He wanted to be back in Canada. When I went into grade 9, and my French sucked because I'd spent most of my time in Canada or in the United States. I'd gone through grades 1, 2, 3, 4, part of grade 4, finished grade 4 and did all of grade 5 in Canada, and then grade 6 back in the US. My French was garbage. I knew nothing going into grade 7. I knew uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, siete, ocho, nueve, diez, once, doce. I knew, buenos dias, buenos noches, buenos tardes, hasta luego, agua, donde está el baño. I knew a little bit of Spanish. I knew no French. And in grade 7, I failed French. All my classmates, they knew the days of the week, the colors, the months of the year. They knew the basics. Like, comment ça va bien, all that stuff. I didn't know anything. Failed it again in grade 8. And then I went into high school. And in my era, you were not required to take French. And I was thrilled. Yay, I don't have to take French. Good, because I will fail. And my father, God bless him, he said, "You're taking one French credit. I want to see that on your transcript. When you graduate from high school, I want you to have a French credit on your transcript." And I said, "But I'll fail." And he said, "No, you won't. You'll study and you're going to pass it. You're going to get one French credit." I'm like, "Fine, go ahead." And so I put French down, took it in September, October, November, and I was failing. Come February, my mark was about 35%, and my dad's on my case. And I said, "I told you, all these other kids started learning French in grade 5 and 6. When I was in grade 5 and 6, when I was in grade 5 in Canada, they didn't teach us any French. And, you know, well, I don't know anything." And then fortuitously, there's a big word, my teacher, who I had 35% with, she went on maternity leave and was replaced by a young teacher, about 22, 23 years old, first teaching job. And she liked to wear skirts that were just above the knee. And she had legs. Oh, she had Steffi Graf, Gabriela Sabatini, Hannah Manlakova, tennis players. She had a tennis player's legs. She was gorgeous. And my mark went from 35%. I ended up with getting 60 something. And found I had an affinity for the French language and continued on with it. À cette heure, dans l'année 2026, à l'âge de 60 ans, je peux dire que je suis plus ou moins bilingue. I'm more or less bilingual. Je peux fonctionner très bien dans la langue française. I can function quite well in the French language. Anyway, I don't know why I went off on that long tangent, but it was nice going down memory lane. Um, so Dustin, if you still think I'm Yeah, I've got the CIA is paying me on the sly, or the FBI or someone. And now, a guy like Dustin will, if he could, he'd put that little section out. Um, anyway, and Dan says, and we say that we want free trade. We've totally shut out American banks from Canada. That's what got me off on that tangent. They totally shut off uh, American retail banking, and I've got to read up on that again. There's a specific reason why within Canada's Banking Act that precludes American firms from opening up here. Um, and we're not going to change our Bank Act. And I haven't heard Americans complaining about wanting to change our Bank Act, or they don't want the Canada Bank Act change. It's a big reason why Canada in 2008, when the great financial crisis hit, a big reason that Canada weathered the storm much better than the Americans wasn't because of Mark Carney at the Bank of Canada. It's because of our Banking Act and because of the fact that the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation used everyone who has a mortgage in Canada, uh, not everyone. Some go through private insurance, but you almost everyone in Canada with a mortgage has it insured by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and they pay premiums to them. And CMHC had hundreds of millions of dollars under management in insurance, which they have to hold back if a mortgage goes bad. If someone defaults on their mortgage, then that's what that money is there for. And they were able to use the Harper government had the CMHC, Jim Flaherty, our finance minister at the time, um, basically use that capital to inject liquidity into the Canadian capital markets, which meant that Mark Carney wasn't allowed to engage in his favorite little game of printing more money. The central bankers refer to printing more money. They call it quantitative easing, but that's what it is. Quantitative easing is printing more money. What happens is a government issues a bond, and then the central bank prints money to buy the bond. And so the quantitative part is the injection of newly printed money, and the easing is the easing on restrictions about how much money the central banks are allowed to inject into the marketplace. Quantitative easing, printing more money. They don't call it printing more money because intuitively, Canadians, Americans, people all around the world know that printing more money is inflationary. All you have to do is look back at the old Weimar Republic in post-World War I Germany, when that was their economy had been crushed. They were faced with paying the bill for World War I because they lost. They were had to pay reparations, and it bankrupted them. And so what the governments in Germany did during this Weimar Republic era is they printed and printed and printed. They nationalized a lot of the printing presses and just pounded out the money. As a matter of fact, they started printing Deutschmarks on only one side so that they could increase production. And workers in Germany would insist on being paid immediately after leaving work so that they could go straight away to the shops, because they knew if they waited until the following morning, their money would be worth less. A loaf of bread that cost 100 Deutschmarks, if they waited until tomorrow, it would be up to 125, 130. So you get your money right away. And but they knew they couldn't call it that, so they called it quantitative easing. And Mark Carney engaged in that. He's done it in Canada. He's done it in Britain. Britain inflation went through the roof after Mark Carney went over there. Mark Carney was not allowed to engage. He what during the great financial crisis, 2008, Canada did not engage in quantitative easing. Jim Flaherty, our Minister of Finance during the Stephen Harper government, rather than have the central banks print more money with quantitative easing, instead, they used the wealth of the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, CMHC, to inject capital into the market, because so much capital with the US real estate market imploding, so much of liquidity just got written off the books. It no longer existed. Money evaporated. There was a liquidity crunch. And it's essential for businesses to have access to capital. I need to expand my operations. I have a client who wants to buy my product. However, I'm running maximum capacity. I need to open up, I need to build a new production facility. I need to hire new workers, but my business is growing and I'm reinvesting and I don't have the money for that kind of capital outlay. I have to go to the bank. But the bank turns around and says, sorry, all the money we lent out has now disappeared. The people who owed us money they've all declared bankruptcy. So, and their loans aren't worth the paper they were written on. So sorry, we don't have any money for you. And so to inject capital into the markets, Jim Flaherty as finance minister under Stephen Harper, they called it the IMPP, Insured Mortgage Purchase Plan. I forget it was called the IMPP, and the I stood for insured, M for mortgage, and PP was something plan, purchase plan, provisional plan, something like that. Anyway, it's hard to keep all the details. I operate completely off the cuff. I did back of the envelope, just did some writing on the, trade numbers, just so I'd have them right at hand. What's being tariffed by the US, hockey equipment, clothing, furniture, consumer agricultural industries, dairy, sugar, booze, about $20 billion worth of goods that go into the US is being tariffed, about 5% of the total trade between Canada and the US. That's what this has started, this war. But anyway, going to read on. NC 8689 is writing. And then I scrolled and lost it. There it is. NC is saying that I am biased and telling opinions that are only yours. Well, who else's opinion am I going to share? Yes, and I do not contend that mine is the majority viewpoint, but the majority isn't always right. Majority of Canadians thought that wearing a mask when standing and then taking it off when sitting down, a lot of Canadians thought that was the right thing to do. Was it? Oh no. Oh, I'm standing up. Now the virus can get me. No, I have to put a mask on. Oh, I'm sitting down. The virus can't touch me. Just because something isn't popular doesn't mean it's wrong necessarily. And NC is stating his opinion. NC 8689 thinks that Mark Carney is a brilliant economist. And he thinks it's been proven by what? What's the proof? The fact that Canada is the only G7 nation that's fallen into recession, is that proof of Mark Carney's economic genius? What is it? The fact that he decided which company he's going to try and negotiate with to give our Canadian Navy a working submarine. Right now, Canada has 4 submarines, only one works, and it's diesel. It's not nuclear. It's incapable of patrolling the high Arctic, protecting Canadian sovereignty, because in order to do deep, long duration missions under the ice, for that you need nuclear submarines. Diesels, even modern diesels, need to snorkel. They need to bring in air, because the atmospheric control needed within a submarine in order to create that for a long duration stay deep under the ice. And that's what you have to do if you want to properly patrol Canadians' Arctic sovereignty. If you want to protect Canada's Arctic sovereignty, you need a nuclear submarine, and we don't have any. Well, that's okay. The Americans look after it for us. As a matter of fact, Canada's now retired former um, the commander of the Canadian Royal Navy, formerly. Um, Call him the commander emeritus, if you like. He said that even though the new submarines that Canada might buy are not nuclear and are incapable of properly surveilling the Arctic and protecting our sovereignty, he said, we don't have to worry. The Americans can do that for us. And that was within the last month or so, after the Carney government decided that we are going to attempt to negotiate a purchase agreement with, I believe the company name is TKMS. It's a German Norwegian consortium, arms manufacturer, shipbuilder, and that there was a bidding war, not a bidding war. There was the South Koreans and this TKMS, German Norwegian company against a Hawaiian. Where did I get that from? South Korean company. They were bidding to be the company with which the Carney Liberals would try and negotiate a contract. And we said, no, sorry, South Korea, we're going to go with TKMS and we're going to try and negotiate a deal with them. If we fail, we might come back to you. And this was framed in the press as a deal. Canada signed, Canada has a deal now for new submarines and it's like, no, we don't. There's no deal. There's no contract. Nothing's being built. Even if a contract is signed, we won't get our first submarine if they finally do make a deal for another 10 years. It's insane. So is that why he's brilliant? When he got first order of business, when he got back from Tuscany, Italy, meeting with his old Brookfield buddy at his private villa, I imagine. His first order of business was to announce another deal for a hydroelectric project at Churchill Falls, a deal between something that Newfoundland and Quebec have been talking about for decades, at least for 30, 40 years. And they announced it was in the CBC as, here's the deal, a new deal. And Carney, pulled out his government credit card. We've got 10 billion to inject into this deal to ensure it goes forward. So is there a deal? Nope. They were updating a memorandum of understanding that had been previously signed, and the no deal has been signed. Nothing has been finalized. The terms that they've agreed to expire in March. If they do come to a deal, they've agreed to the terms it will have. This is what a memorandum of understanding is. Well, we're not agreeing, but if we do agree, these are the terms. And we'll see if we can, hammer out the ancillary issues outside of this, but at least on these core ideas, we agree. So it's framed as a deal. And I agree with NC. He is brilliant. Mark Carney is brilliant at presenting agreements as deals when there are no signed contracts. At that, he's brilliant. At spending money that Canada doesn't have, he is brilliant. That your opinion. Justin, I think this is with respect to me, that at least this guy, I think you're referring to myself, welcomes free speech. I'll give him that. Thank you. And ultimately, I don't, this is not the greatest forum, YouTube. I'm talking to a screen. I'm looking at my own image right now, at least to get a sense of what I look like. But it's too easy at a keypad or on a mic like this to forget the humanity on the other side. And I recognize Dustin, NC, while we may disagree, I don't think you're evil. I don't think you're being paid by whatever. I don't think there's any nefarious I do know, you got to be circumspect in today's world. There are not very many people such as myself who are willing to stick themselves out there to this degree, have their own YouTube station, put their name and their face out there. My name is Gordon Causey. My handle, my sobriquet, if you will, is Gordy Canuck. But because I do feel a Canuck. Both my parents, three of my four grandparents, and further back are Canadian. I served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I grew up playing hockey, even when I was living in the United States. When I lived in New Jersey, I played in the Passac Valley Hockey League. And half the kids playing in the league, probably more than that, were either Canadians themselves or their parents were Canadian. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, I played hockey. And again, at least half the kids on my team were either Canadians themselves or their parents were Canadian. Yeah. Anyway, and I know the mere fact that I spent time growing up in the United States, in and around just a little over 9 years. I often say almost 10, just to round it off. Well, from 1967 till 1969 in New York City, then later in New Jersey, where we lived until 1975, and then from 77, 78 for 1 year, I lived in Portland, Oregon. Does that make me an American? Give me a break. I was a kid. My dad worked for a major Canadian bank. We got transferred down there. It was funny when I had to go to CSIS when I was in the signals branch of the military. That means I worked in places like ComSens, communication centers, where top secret, confidential, secret, top secret documents, information would be passed around on display. So I had to have a top secret security clearance. And so I went and I was vetted by CSIS. And it was funny because I'm very honest, told them everything. Yeah, I grew up in the United States in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, grade 6. And then at one point during the interview, after going through all this, probably took about 45 minutes to an hour. The agent asked me, he said, "Have you ever sworn allegiance or fidelity to a foreign government or power?" And I went, "Yeah, I have." And I swear, I think he had already ticked off no. He's It's like he probably had 20 of us to do over the course of a week, and he's just like, I just want to get this over and get back to Ottawa. And I think he'd already marked off no, and then his head shut up and he says, You sworn a fidelity, allegiance to a foreign government or power?" And I said, "Yeah, I told you I spent time growing up in the US, in New Jersey and Oregon. Morning exercises. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the Republic. Every day you say that was part of the opening exercises, and I did." And then he looked down at his sheet and he went, "That doesn't count." Fair enough, your decision. But um, I'm going to read these up and then I'm going to call it a night. I've got NC writing, "What did you achieve other than empty conspiracy theories that are a sign of ignorance more than intelligence? You don't think people conspire? You don't think that Watergate happened? You don't think that this is the thing. This is the biggest difficulty we have in today's world is you have people sit there and all you have to do is put the label conspiracy label on something, say that there was a conspiracy, and they think, "Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy." And the fact of the matter is that um, criminal conspiracy is one of the most commonly laid charges in the criminal justice system. Like Watergate was a conspiracy. There are all kinds of conspiracy. Now, conspiracy doesn't always have to be illegal. If you plan a surprise party, you conspire to deceive the birthday celebrant. It's a conspiracy. Uh, but conspiracies can also be illegal. Iran-Contra, the Iran-Contra affair in the United States, conspiracy. Igor Guzenko, who spied on Canada, part of a conspiracy. And this pejorative, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. I'm sorry, NC 8689, but it does sound to me like you need to take two CBCs and another CTV nightly newscast and maybe go to bed. Dustin is saying, I am concerned. Okay, Dan, and Dustin is saying that he is conservative or has conservative sensibilities. However, all Canadians, liberal, NDP, or conservative, need to put their politics aside and destroy the USA. Oh my God. See, the difficulty I have with that argument, Dustin, is it's emotional. It's not rational. And I get it. I get it. It's like COVID when everyone was so scared. We got to do whatever we have to. If I have to be an idiot and wear a mask when standing but not sitting, I'm ready to do it. I'll do whatever you tell me. I'll follow stickers on the floor. I'll get my fifth shot. Just tell me what to do. I'm scared. The problem with fear. Fear is, fear robs a person of their ability to think critically. And so we're staring down at a country of 350-ish, 350 odd million. Canada's 40 million. They have an economy that's $29 trillion a year. GDP, gross domestic product. Ours is only 2.2. Their economy is 13 times more than 13 times bigger than our own. It's like the 100-pound guy, you know, 5'2", 110 pounds, who I'm going to beat the crap out of whoever. Pick a boxer, or a wrestler or something. Choose your comparator. It sounds wonderful. It's very dry. It's based on emotion, but I would submit that you're not thinking critically. That the Americans, Canada, we've been very smart over the years. We recognize that the United States will never tolerate having a hostile power on its borders. Witness the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you're unfamiliar, Kennedy administration. So we're dealing with pre-1964, before I was born. And the Cuba was allowing the Soviet Union, Russia, the old Soviet Union, to build silos and to put the infrastructure in place that could eventually house nuclear ballistic missiles. And they would have been I think it's 90 miles between Cuba and Florida, right on their doorstep. And the Kennedy administration put an embargo. They put a flotilla around Cuba. And a lot of people in the world were on a razor's edge, right? Is the world going, the US will not tolerate. We saw what the Americans did during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We know Americans will never tolerate a hostile power being on their border. And so we've allowed our Canadian military to be grossly underfunded. When I was in the military, I didn't drive a tank or a ship. The only naval ship I was ever on was one of the, I think they're called Halifax class frigates, the HMCS Ville de Quebec. I went on that boat. I would never be in the Navy. I get claustrophobic. And these are not battles. We don't have battleships. We don't have destroyers. We sure as heck don't have any aircraft carriers in this country. We have these frigates, which are a good support vehicle or a good support vessel, but they could be part of a battle group. But they would, you've got your destroyers, your aircraft carriers, and then your support vehicles, your support vessels. And that's all we have. We have 4 submarines, but 3 of them don't work. Only one works. But our aging Sea King helicopters are falling out of the sky. When I was in the military, we would drive service vehicles that were 20 years old, that were falling apart. I went on exercises down the Trans-Canada Highway going at 60 kilometers an hour when the speed limit's 100. You get into New Brunswick, it went up to 110, and we're clogging up the roads at 100 or at 60 because that's as fast as the damn thing. That's as fast as we can make them go. Might get to 80 downhill with a tailwind, but our attitude has always been, well, the Americans will take care of it. They're never going to allow Russia or China or foreign power to, so they'll protect us so we don't have to worry about it. And now I know that Carney is making a big deal over the fact that Canada has increased its military spending to 2.5% of GDP, as is required by NATO. However, we've never met it until now. But the question I have is, how are we meeting it? Are we meeting it through expanding recruitment of people who aren't even Canadian citizens? Now, the Canadian Armed Forces is allowing individuals to come into the forces who are not Canadian citizens, who have landed status, many of whom do not speak English or French as a first language. I have heard rumblings, call it through the grapevine, if you will, that it's like DEI on steroids in terms of the standards being lowered to ensure that they can meet their recruitment numbers. I do not know this empirically. I do not have firsthand knowledge. This is what I'm hearing. Um, that so I question the degree to which how much more robust are the Canadian Armed Forces being made? People will talk and they'll point to that submarine deal, but it's not a deal. We haven't signed a contract with any company to supply the Canadian Navy with new submarines. All we've done is decided which company we are going to try and negotiate a contract with. Anyway, uh, Dustin is writing. Uh, So yeah, I got onto your point about let's destroy the US. Good luck. Uh, and NC, who cares what I think? Well, you don't have to. I'm not telling you do. You came here. All right. Yeah, I'm not CBC News here. I do not get government financing. I get no financing. I don't get anything from anyone, not from the government of Canada, not from anyone. If I did, I wouldn't have a crappy rural ISP connection that lags a lot. I I'd have a studio, I'd have a green screen, I'd have a mic, I'd have professional lighting. So half my face isn't in shadow half the time. Oh man. Thank you for uh NC. You sound anti-Canadian. You know, who decides what a Canadian is allowed to think? That sounds, I'm gonna, I think to accuse someone of being anti-Canadian for expressing honestly held opinions, do you not think that sounds a little, dare I say, fascist? You're not thinking the right things. A good Canadian only thinks this way. We must destroy the United States. We're going to rise up. I don't share your opinion. Am I allowed to express it without being accused of being anti-Canadian? You sound like Frank Burns in MASH. Yeah. Individuality is okay as long as everyone's doing the same thing. Do we allow individuality in this country? These are questions that I hope get people to think rather than just react, and to recognize when emotion comes in. I mean, I've brought up my faith. I know you don't, Dustin didn't seem to like it, but in the Bible, the words fear not appear 365 times. It's probably more than that, but Christians, we like to say 365, one for every day of the year. But why is there such this overwhelming admonition in the Bible against fear? Why are we not to fear? And I will submit it is because of this. Fear, again, robs you of your critical thinking skills. When you're afraid, when you're in an emotional state, you're much easier to manipulate. We saw it over and over in COVID. I was watching CBC News, or it may not have been CBC News. I was working still in the forces at a radar station. In the background, we always had during daytime business hours, Monday to Friday from about 8 or so in the morning until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. The TV was only allowed to have current events news programming, and we're watching a news program, mainstream news, and they came out with that heavy music, bum, 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 breaking news. The tsunami of death continues at the Pine Ridge Nursing Home in Bobcaygeon, Ontario. And I listened to that and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Tsunami of death? This is journalism? Sounds like propaganda to me. People dying in a nursing home. Oh, like that never happened before. People living in heaven's waiting room are dying. What a shock. But it worked. People were scared. They heard tsunami of death. Oh my gosh, it's everywhere. During COVID, just putting it out there. And at the time, I felt like I was walking out onto the ice when you're not sure how thick the ice is. I thought, and it seems to me they were saying the ice was thin, but my sense was it's a lot thicker than what they're telling me. And I'd been going to church with a congregation that completely shut down. We're only on Zoom, blah, blah, blah. But then in April or early May, the George Floyd incident happened in the United States. And all of a sudden, this is Canada, it's not America, but all of a sudden we started to have big protest rallies. I didn't quite understand that. If something happens in China, if something happens in Great Britain, if something happens in France, we don't have protests over it. When Charlie Hebdo happened in Paris, France, Canadians didn't have rallies over it. Why are we having a rally about something that happened down in the United States? But whatever, we did. Justin Trudeau, Doug Ford, all of a sudden, before George Floyd, Canadians were told, you can't go outside. It's too dangerous. I'm staying home. Stay home, stay safe. A kid in Ottawa went out, played some hoops alone outside his own house, got fined hundreds of dollars. Can't be outside. It's too dangerous. We're closing the parks. If you got to walk your dog, okay, but then as soon as you're done, get home. And then George Floyd, and now all of a sudden it's okay for hundreds, even 1,000 plus people to be out marching shoulder to shoulder. I'm like, what? That makes no sense. And God bless him, a pastor in this town at a church I was not attending at the time, Glenn, opened up his church for outdoor worship. And I went, hallelujah. It was a Pentecostal church. I never grew up I'm not a Pentecostal. So, but I went. I knew a number of people at the church. I share the confession that Pentecostals share, and that we both, whether you're Pentecostal or not, Christians assert that Jesus Christ is King. He is Lord and King, that he went to the cross to atone for the sins of mankind so that through him we are reconciled to a perfect and holy God. I'm not here to evangelize, but this is what I believe. And so I went to the Pentecostal churches, and I knew Josh there. We played basketball together. I knew Fred from men's suppers that we'd had. And we're hugging, shaking hands, we're acting normal. And then sadly, one gentleman who went to the Pentecostal church, Colin, who I would talk to every week, lost his housing situation and was forced into had to go live in a homeless shelter in Belleville, Grace Inn. And so I used to go and pick him up once or twice a week. I'd drive down to the Grace Inn, pick him up, and we'd go to the drive-through at Tim Hortons or Burger King, McDonald's, whatever. If you were a small business, you're hammered. But if you're a big corporation like Tim Hortons, like McDonald's, like Burger King, Amazon, the big companies, they did great. They made more money. The small guys got hammered. So we go get a coffee and maybe a burger or two. And here I am during what is supposed to be a deadly pathogen, a pandemic with a deadly pathogen circulating around. I mean, if anyone's going to get wiped out, it's going to be homeless shelters. And I'm picking up a guy once or twice a week in the car. We'd shake hands. I mean, we're in a car, the windows closed. It was November, December, January. And why didn't I die? And then um, we had that second lockdown that came out along in March of 2021, second lockdown. And what happened? Uh, that Pentecostal church shut down completely again. And I found a church up in Peterborough, Ontario, that was gathering with no restrictions at all. And it's about an hour away. So I started to drive up there. And we were shaking hands, hugging, acting normal. And I went to churches in Aylmer, in Kitchener, in Napanee, any church I could find that was gathering without the stupid, non-science based. Anthony Fauci even admitted that that 6 feet distancing, that there was no, it was not based on any empirical scientific finding. Just basically pulled it out of his nether regions and said everyone stay 6 feet apart. Mr. I take the fifth. Mr. I decline to answer that question under the grounds that I might incriminate myself. Anyway, actually, NC, it has been tested by the CAF. Last time it was tested was back in around 2010, and my IQ came in at 132. Not a genius, but not stupid. But I get it. You watch CBC News, they're God. And so whatever they say is truth, and anyone who contradicts them is stupid. Understood. Dustin has had his message deleted. And Nancy is saying we are Christian patriots for our country, not when we see it destroyed piece by piece. Yeah, and I think Canadians are going to slowly wake up to the fact, slowly, and they're going to find out that we are being sold down the river. That, to use an old expression from the U.S. slave trade, if you're unfamiliar where that came from, we are being sold down the river, and Carney is cozying us up to the Chinese communists. We had during our last election, we had a guy by the name of Chiang, 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 Shang, not sure exactly how to pronounce it. A gentleman who was a sitting MP in the Liberal government, which was now led by Mark Carney. And he was giving a press conference, and there was a conservative candidate running in a neighboring GTA riding by the name of Joe Tay, Tay. And Joe Tay had a bounty placed on his head by Chinese police officials in Hong Kong because Joe Tay believes in democracy and has been advocating for democratic reform in Hong Kong. So the Communist Chinese government has placed a bounty on his head of 1 million Chinese Hong Kong dollars, Chinese yuan, I guess. It was about $200,000 in Canadian dollars, 180, 200,000, somewhere around there. And this Chang, I forget his first name, MP for Markham Unionville, I believe is the riding in the GTA of Toronto. He told the media at his press conference that if you want to collect 1 million Chinese Hong Kong dollars, just go kidnap Joe Tay and deliver him to the US consulate. I'm just kidding, but if you do it, you're going to get 200 grand. And Mark Carney stood by him. Mark Carney stood by this man. He did not. He should have immediately, if Mark Carney was a Canada first kind of guy, Mark Carney would have said, you are not fit to be running as candidate for my party. We're the Liberal Party of Canada, not the Liberal Party of China. I'm withdrawing your candidacy. Mark Carney didn't do that. Now, I think what may have happened, totally opinion on my part, but I think this Chiang, does he have ties to the Chinese Communist Party? I don't know. I think it's possible. We found out that Canada had a intern working at NATO headquarters who has now been charged with spying espionage on behalf of the communist Chinese. You think we've been told by CSIS and the RCMP that China is engaged in interference in Canada's political system? Now, this Chang, I think his name was Paul Chang. Did he eventually withdrew from running for re-election for his seat in Parliament of his own volition? But I wondered, while Mark Carney wasn't going to stand up for democratic values, Paul Chang of his own accord withdrew. And I wonder, did someone call Paul Chang and say, look, it's not going to look too good. You're going to hurt the cause. Withdraw. You got your parliamentary pension, you have your police pension. This guy was a former police officer. And he was jokingly saying, go kidnap this guy. They got a Chinese have $1 million bounty on his head, $1 million in Hong Kong money, about 200 grand Canadian. Go pick him up. If that doesn't bother you, I know that a lot of people will, when it's their side doing something wrong, like they'll criticize. A lot of people criticized Stephen Harper back around 2007 or 2008. Stephen Harper prorogued Parliament. It's when the word prorogue entered the Canadian vocabulary. Stephen Harper suspended Parliament because he was facing a vote of no confidence that he would have lost. And so he prorogued Parliament. And then the process of doing that is called prorogation. And it was a horrible thing. The Liberals, he's suspending democracy. But when Justin Trudeau prorogued Parliament, when he was faced with the same situation, when support for him leading the Liberal Party had just about evaporated into nothing, they couldn't win a seat in downtown Montreal or in downtown Toronto, Liberal fortresses. Couldn't even win their fortress ridings where everyone votes Liberal, even if the candidate is a lawn chair. They vote Liberal anyway. He still couldn't win. And then he prorogued Parliament. But now prorogation is okay. There are some things I will criticize Pierre Poilievre over. I do not like the fact that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives ran ads using AI. They did an ad that showed a young couple in line at a food bank, I think it was, and they said, don't worry, we're only technically hungry, or something like that. I saw the ad one or two times. However, and it's obvious, you can tell it's AI generated. And I thought that it looks bad because a lot of people don't like AI. And two, it looks bad because why aren't you hiring actual actors, actual production staff, lighting, editing? It saved them a lot of money using AI. I am sure they would need to find a location. There's lighting, there's actors, there's production, there's a lot of money goes into making these political ads. And AI can do a reasonable facsimile at a tiny fraction of the cost, but I think the optics are horrible. And I thought that was a very bad move. I do not like the fact that Pierre Poilievre is against the high-speed rail project between Windsor and Quebec City, or Toronto and Montreal. I think they've been talking about high-speed rail between in this Golden Horseshoe, been talking about it since I was in high school, since the 80s. It's never going to happen, I'm convinced. We just love to talk about it. And I think Pierre Poilievre, I think it's a poor decision politically to come out against it. I think it's fine to criticize the consultants and the millions of dollars being spent when nothing's happening yet. fair enough, but come out in support of the concept of the idea of building this high-speed rail. It would be wonderful for the economy, for ease of travel. You know, at the end of the day, there are things that I will absolutely criticize Pierre Poilievre. You always have to put some water in your wine. I'm not going to be running for office because I would have zero chance of winning. My agenda, you know, you get the point. Anyway, Dustin is having, and Eatney is throwing in a little factoid. She's saying that the word conspiracy was coined for the American public who doubted the official story of who offed JFK. They were not conspiracy. Yeah, I think you mean conspiracy theory. Uh, the word conspiracy, people have always been conspiring, going back to, the White Witch affair during the Thomas Becket affair, 1200 in England. There have been conspiracies for as long as there have been human beings. We've always conspired, but I think you're talking about conspiracy theory was coined. Um, who doubted questions that are left unanswered for 50 years. Yeah. Do I believe that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy? I think he was involved in it. I think he had a role to play in it. I don't think but I do not believe that he was acting alone, but whatever. And that looks like we're about done. Uh, and Eat Me Nancy is asking, have you heard that the World Health Organization drastically shaved their effective? The rats left the ship. I'm not sure for what it's worth. Anyone curious? Nancy, sa première langue, c'est le français. Her first language is French. And a lot of people use talk to text and things can get, so I'm not sure, I'm not understanding. Have you heard that the WHO, the World Health Organization, drastically shaved their effective? I'm not sure what you're meaning to say, but the one thing I do know is that now that the US has withdrawn from the World Health Organization, they're no longer providing the funding. And like so many things in the world, at least on the international side, when you deal with multinational organizations, the Americans always pay disproportionately more than their share, like NATO. And now they've withdrawn, they've pulled out of the WHO. And so the World Health Organization doesn't have the money it used to. So if they're having to reduce staff, if they're having to cut back on programs, wouldn't surprise me in the least. As if the Americans aren't there footing the bill. Um, and at any rate, and Nancy's writing something else, and this is true. I did look into this. She's writing that, did you know that Carney removed assets to take care of and maintain our forests? Did you know they spray Roundup all over our forests to save costs? And yeah, what's Roundup called again? Trying to remember the name of the Roundup. It's the name, is a trade name, is a brand name. Trying to remember the actual name of the pesticide, herbicide. But in terms of Canada removing assets, the Carney government cut $2.9 billion from government agencies that help to mitigate against forest fire risk. One is satellite surveillance that will help Ottawa-based scientists to identify areas that have a greater potential for forest fire activity. Then there's also, they cut back on teams that would go in and, well, I mean, it's a multi-layered process and it would never eliminate all forest fires, but it can help to reduce the number. Ottawa had teams of scientists who would go in and check moisture levels on forest beds. You can fact check this. It's true. And that was cut back as well. And the cutbacks to the departments that look after these type of activities that help mitigate, not eliminate. We're going to have forest fires every year, happen every, even if we do everything perfect, there's still going to be forest fires. Um, but it would reduce the number. And the cuts were in the neighborhood of 2.9 billion to those agencies that help the provinces target vulnerable, at-risk forest areas. Like you might look at an area and go, okay, that one's a green area. We're not going to worry about that. This one's orange. This one's yellow. This one's flaming red. Let's get a team out there. Well, now there are only 4 scientists in Canada who are engaged in this activity of going and measuring moisture levels in areas where it looks like there's a high likelihood of potential forest fire activity. Now we got 4 guys who go out and do that. I mean, obviously, our forests are vast. We're dealing with thousands, tens of thousands, maybe 100, I don't know how many hectares of forest we have in this country, but it is beyond belief in size. And you're never going to eliminate the risk totally. But that's at the federal level. At the provincial level, provinces like Ontario, Alberta, Nova Scotia uh, have cut back on what do they call it? Burn, where they do controlled burns. They would do control burns when they find soil conditions and very dry and lots of dry kindling. They dig out fire trenches around an area, a large area, and then burn off the undergrowth and then replant. Anyway, uh, there's too much going on, and I've been going on. This is one of my longest streams ever. Thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you for all the engagement. It was fantastic. I'm going to endeavor to try and keep doing Sunday night lives, probably in around an hour. This one went a little long, but it's a hot topic. And Dustin, you were a lot of fun tonight. Honestly. Unless you're being openly hateful, I wish you, Nancy and Danny, who do the moderating, I can't do it myself, and we have been spammed before. If that's what they were doing, thank you. Um, but if not, I do believe in. I don't mind responding. It's fun. I love ad hominem attacks. You're stupid. You're stupid. You don't agree with me. You're stupid. Carney's the greatest. It's true. I saw it on TBT News. I can do the ad hominem straw man attack as well as anyone. uh, or at least close. Anyway, God bless. Thank you for watching. And I usually will end my streams with a blessing from the book of Numbers. It comes at the end of chapter 6. Um, so, anyway, the blessing is may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord God Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, may he grant you peace. And even in a crazy world where we have a pending trade war with our closest neighbor, a Goliath of a country, 13 times, their economy is 13 times bigger than our own. They don't have 10 times the population, even, but their economy, we punch below our weight. We're a very small economy. Dustin is back. He's saying so many big words. Sometimes I do have a decent vocabulary. I do like to throw it in there every now and again, whether it's understood or not. So many big words. Canadians just hear this, just realize any Canadian isn't all about Canada. Is okay. This would make any Canadian think he has an American agenda on it. I don't think you worded that very well, Dustin. But again, I know you got your ideas coming out and typing. But, there's so many big words. Canadians just hear this. Just realize any Canadian isn't all about Canada. Not the greatest sentence. Is okay. This would make any Canadian think he has an American agenda on his mind. Not all Canadians are hyper fixated on the president of a foreign country, the United States. I'm not. I'm more fixated on the country where I live. Um, I'm not going to blame everything on a foreign country. I think, there's that old, it is an American expression from Harry S. Truman. He used to say, the buck stops here. Mark Carney's always, well, it's not my fault. It's Trump. That happened after I left. It's not my fault. I don't like that. I like a guy who takes responsibility, even if he messes up. Even if he messes up. When he messed up about explaining the Gordie Howe Bridge deal, when he told Canadians that, we're going to pay the debt off first before we split revenues. When he said that, hey, that sounds great. First, we start paying off the debt, then we give Americans half of what is left over. That was not correct. And if he'd owned it, I would have applauded him if he'd said, look, I screwed up. I I presented it as the debt being paid first and then revenue splitting. That was wrong. My bad. I apologize. I messed up. Hey, hallelujah. But instead he said, well, I didn't explain myself well enough, as if there was some confusion in his description. There was not. He explained it in Calgary at the Stampede very well. He just had the facts completely wrong. And he changed his name from Dustin Hoffman, it looks like. He used to be Dustin Hoffman. His username he chose was a American Hollywood star. Anyway, God bless everyone. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, consider it. And likes help a lot. And if you watch this on replay, 2+ hours worth, you're welcome to comment in the comment section down below. Hope to see you all back. Bye for now. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone. I'm not going to, Nancy and Danny, thank you. Not going to say everyone else's name. God bless.